Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you type something on the chat just so I know you're here? Yes? Awesome. Can you type where are you watching this from? São Paulo, Brasil, Santos, Dourados, Patos. Oh my, can't read too fast. But glad you're all here and that you can hear us. On behalf of São Paulo of BRAZ-TESOL São Paulo chapter, I'd like to welcome you all. I'd like to thank our sponsors. Check out this list. Bridge Educational Group, Cultura Inglesa, GISAL, GSOP Financial Literacy, National Geographic, SBS, A Página, Talking FL, Brelt, Stephen Hughes, and Rodrigo Sigoli. And of course, thank you so very much, Sergio Pantoja, for accepting the invitation. Thank you for being
Bruno.
here with us today. And well, it's time to start. BRAZ-TESOL São Paulo chapter, back to foundations with you, Sergio.
Thank you, Bruno. Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? If you can hear me, please type yes in the chat box just for me to, yes. Okay, thank you very much. Right, so I'd like to thank São Paulo, the BRAZ-TESOL São Paulo chapter for the invitation. I'm incredibly happy to be here. Hello, I can see there are a lot of people, some former students. So let's get started. And I'm going to try to keep an eye here on the chat box. Okay, so this morning we're going to be talking about getting started with teaching exam classes. And here you can see the outline of my webinar. So it's kind of ambitious, but I hope to give you an overview of the most important points when it comes to teaching exam classes, or when it comes to getting started teaching exam classes. So I'm going to be talking about becoming a successful exams teacher, understanding the exam, designing a course, developing exam strategies and language, assigning homework, and monitoring progress. Okay, so to start with, I'd like to pose a question. When you think about a successful exams teacher, what qualities come to mind? Or to put it in another way, to be a successful exams teacher, it is important to, and I'd like you to write what you think it's important, in your opinion, in a chat box. So just for me, so that I can see some of your answers and some of your perceptions. To be familiar with the exam, know the exams, to be fluent, Wallace says, practice exam skills. No details. To be organized, understand assessment, Priscilla says. Test format. Okay, know the exams, to be organized again. Okay, I can see that many of you have pointed out the fact that we are supposed to be familiar with the exam that we are teaching, right? Yes, undoubtedly. Get acquainted with the assessment criteria, okay. Fantastic, thank you very much. So I'm going to show you some of the things that, in my opinion, are vital when it comes to being successful as an exams teacher. The first point is to think that exams are important and useful. I think it goes without saying, right? But when students come to us, they're looking for preparation classes. I would say that not only do they expect us to provide them with exam strategies and help them develop their skills and the language so that they can pass the exam, but also they expect us to be supportive and to take it very seriously. So if we don't take it very seriously, I think that students are not going to buy it, even though they are the ones that are interested in taking the exam. But we need to convey the message that we believe and we understand the impact that exams can have on their lives, on their careers, on their studies. And I think that when they feel that, they tend to take it more seriously and they tend to get more committed and more engaged. Also, to understand the exam as you're teaching, as you have mentioned, I know that it sounds obvious, but from time to time, some teachers come to me asking for tips. They're going to start teaching a particular exam, and they ask for tips as to how they can go about it. And the very first question I ask them is, have you taken the exam yourself? And believe it or not, sometimes the answer is no, I haven't taken it yet. I'm not saying that you should, I mean, ideally, you're right, to study and prepare and maybe take the exam yourself. But if you can't, I think that at least you should sit down and take one or two mock exams, so then you can, you can get a feel, you can get to know what it's like. And you can put we can put ourselves right in our students' shoes. Also, to listen to our students' concerns and anxieties. I think that it's of paramount importance here to understand that we're not just teaching skills, language, exam strategies, but we're also dealing with people. And when it comes to exams, people tend to have mixed feelings. You have people who love taking exams, but most people don't. So we must be prepared, because students are going to come to us with their anxieties, fears, concerns, and we must be ready to support them. Something that let me tell you a short story. Something that happened to me recently was a student of mine who's preparing for the C2 proficiency, also known as the CPE. And she told me that she hadn't written in English for a long time, and she was kind of afraid of sitting down and writing her first essay. And then we had a conversation, and I told her, that it was, if she were to follow all the structure and the model that we had studied in class, that she'd be able to cope with it. And then it helped to reduce her anxiety and made her feel more comfortable to start writing. So, and it got me thinking that if it can happen to teachers, let alone regular students, right? So we must be prepared to tackle these issues. Because once again, it's not just teaching language or skills, but also helping people to overcome some of the issues that come with exam taking. All right. Number 4, to give honest and direct feedback. This was something that I learned the hard way. When I started, the first student that I prepared for an exam was back in 2007. Long time ago. And it was very hard for me at first to give people direct feedback. And I think it's for most people. But when it comes to exams, it becomes even more important, because students are going to decide whether they're going to take the exam or not based on our feedback. This is what happens most of the time. So hence, we need to give honest and direct feedback to help them decide whether they should take the exam or not. And most importantly, throughout the course, when we give them feedback, supposedly they're going to get our feedback and work on it, so then they can work and improve their weaknesses and areas in need of improvement. Next, it's also important to motivate students and foster autonomous learning. Needless to say, there's only so much that exam classes can do. So students must be prepared to keep on working outside the classroom. But sometimes they don't know how. So when it comes to that, they need our guidance to show them what they can do and how they can carry on working on the areas in need of improvement outside the classroom. So sometimes when students are taking general English courses, I think it's not that noticeable. I mean, it should, but it's not that noticeable, the importance of homework, because maybe some students don't have a very clear goal. But when it comes to exam preparation, the goal is very clear, right? It's to prepare students for taking the exam. So we should stress from the very beginning of the course that only the work that's done in the classroom is not enough. We should go beyond that. So they must be prepared to do homework. They must be prepared to continue working at home. Yes, Raquel points out here that it's okay to give them honest feedback as long as you tell them what needs improving. Yes, absolutely, Raquel. It's not just a question of telling them what they need to improve, but we also should help them how to improve. So it's a question of what and how. And finally, manage your own and your students' time effectively. Since I've shifted from general English classes to, and I've been teaching like primarily exam classes, and nowadays 90% of my classes are focused on teachers who are preparing for either C1 Advanced or C2 Proficiency. I've come to realize that it's incredibly important to allocate some time so that you can give your students feedback. In my case, for instance, I used to teach on Wednesday mornings, and I no longer teach on Wednesday mornings because this is the time that I have allocated so that I can give my students feedback. And it takes a long time. This is something that I often talk to other friends, how long it takes them to give feedback on writing. And giving feedback on writing is really time consuming. So if you don't manage your time effectively, chances are that you're not going to be able to provide your students with effective feedback. Okay, Sun Tzu in the book The Art of War said that you should know thyself and know thy enemy. I think it's very applicable when it comes to exams, because you should know thy exam. As I've mentioned before, a lot of teachers start teaching because there is a demand, so students want to have exam classes, but they're not so familiar with the exam that they're teaching. As you guys have pointed out before, I think this is the first step. Before teaching any exam, you have to be fully familiar with the format and how it works, the tasks, marking, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to show you some of the questions to keep in mind when you start teaching an exam to make sure that you know so that we know where we're getting ourselves into. So some of the questions to bear in mind are: how long is the exam? So should know how long the exam takes, not only the exam itself, but the different parts, so that we can teach students strategies so that they can cope with time pressure. Also about the skills that are tested, because not every proficiency exam tests skills in the exact same way. Think about the way that the Cambridge Main Suite tests listening in comparison with TOEFL, for example. Would you say that the way that listening is tested in the TOEFL exam is the same as the way it's tested in the Cambridge Main Suite? If you're familiar with these two exams, yes, type your answer in the chat box, please. Wallace says no. No, very different. Okay. Yes, they are very different because listening in the TOEFL exam is integrated with other skills. So even though you're testing the same skill, it doesn't mean that they're going to be tested in the exact same form. So it changes from exam to exam. And then it comes to us to know how these changes can impact our students' performance. Another question that's important to keep in mind is what sorts of tasks are used to test each skill. I believe it's really important for us to know what each task tests, and how we can help students cope with these tasks as effectively as possible. Let me give an example of something that happened the other day. I was talking to a teacher who has just started preparing students for the B1 preliminary exam. And she told me that her students were struggling to find the answers in reading multiple choice tasks. And then at first, her impression was that the problem had to do with reading skills. So they still had to develop their reading skills. And that's why they were not being able to cope with the exam well. And then one thing that I pointed out that she told me that helped her tremendously was to look at multiple choice tasks in the reading part of the exam as a way of trying to identify how the option is paraphrased in the text. So once she started to look at multiple choice from this perspective, that one of the options you have there is going to be paraphrased in the text, and then it's a question of students trying to find which option is best paraphrased in the text, it did help her to gain a better understanding of how multiple choice tasks work. So it does help if you have this understanding, because then you know what's behind the task, and you become better able to help your students. Tatiana asks here, but the aim is the same, isn't it? Yeah, the aim is the same, but as it changes, Tatiana, as the task changes, the strategies that you're going to teach your students to cope with the task, they can be rather different. Also, how many different parts are there? The different papers and how each one of them assesses different skills. How much time is allowed for each part, so then students know exactly how much time they need to allocate as they go through each paper. What are the assessment criteria for each task type? I'm going to give you an example about that in a minute. And how is the exam marked? So if the items, for example, are worth 1 point or are worth 2 points, because this helps if students, for example, are running out of time, it helps them to prioritize what they need to focus on. And chances are that they need to prioritize the tasks that are worth more points. All right, so I'd like to zero in on the penultimate point we have here, the assessment criteria for each task type. This is a descriptor that I took from a B2 level exam, and it's about writing. This is under the heading of organization. And it says the following: the task is generally well organized and coherent, using a variety of linking words and cohesive devices. So picture this: imagine that you are assessing your students' essay, for instance, a piece of writing, and you are looking at organization, and you are assessing it against this criterion. How would you differ linking words and cohesive devices? Would you say that in the context of this assessment criteria, are they the same thing? They're different things? If so, how different are they? Yes, please type your answers here in the chat box. I can see that you started. Same. English Studio says it's the same. Tiago says they go hand in hand, but I'm not sure if they're the same. Gracie says that they're different. Okay. I believe maybe not all cohesive devices are linking words the same. All right. So in the context of Cambridge exams, because this was taken from the B2 first writing assessment criteria, Cambridge specifically says here a variety of linking words and cohesive devices. So most of the time we take them as the same thing. But when you look at what Cambridge means by linking words and cohesive devices, they state that linking words are cohesive devices, but are separated here to refer to higher frequency vocabulary, which provide explicit linkage. They can range from basic high frequency items such as and but to basic and phrasal items such as because, first of all, finally, etc. Whereas cohesive devices here refer to more sophisticated linking words and phrases, for example, moreover, it may appear, as a result, as well as grammatical devices such as the use of reference pronouns, substitution, ellipsis, or repetition. So it's very important here that we understand this difference when it comes to Cambridge exams, because they're not talking about the exact same thing. And depending on how the use of linking words and cohesive devices, your students can score higher or lower. So it's very important that we understand the exam we're teaching and how they assess the different parts. So here, as you can see, it's not exactly the same thing. All right, moving on to designing a course. What I mean here by designing a course is it's not just a very long course. When I considered that, what I had in mind was it could be a month, it could be 6 months, or it could even be a year course. What I mean is, when you are designing a course, it's in the sense of you're going to plan what you're going to teach, how you're going to teach, the sequence you're going to follow, and other aspects that are of extreme importance, and we should take into consideration for sure. So there is a lot of decisions that we have to make when it comes to planning a course, and it doesn't matter how short it is. For instance, the length of the course, so how long it's going to take for you to prepare your students for that particular exam, whether you are teaching one student, whether you're teaching a group of students. So length is extremely important, because according to the length, we're going to decide whether we're going to place more emphasis on skills and language development, or place more emphasis on exam strategies. Also, the sequencing. So how this course is going to develop, what we're going to do first, what we're going to do second, how one thing is going to build on the next, so then you can have a very logical and coherent sequence, and which will help your students feel that they are making progress. Then the next 3 items, it can be very tough for us to strike a balance between language, skills, and exam strategies. I would say, I don't want to run the risk of oversimplifying things, but if you have a short time to prepare your students and they are, let's say, pretty much at the level that they are targeting, I would say that if you have a short time, then you should prioritize exam strategies, because to develop language and skills, obviously it's going to take longer. So it's a question of taking into account how much time you have, where your students are, their needs, their levels, and what you're going to focus on. Also, the materials, whether you're going to use a course book. Actually, in my experience, you never get to follow only one course book. You can even adopt the course book, but you're going to use supplement material for sure. You're going to have to go beyond the course book in order to help your students. And then this means designing your own materials, or finding resources to supplement whatever it's necessary. Homework is also something that, as I've mentioned before, must be taken into consideration, because it's not just homework it never is, right? Or it never should be, but it's never just homework for the sake of homework. We need to help students here to carry on doing what we started in the classroom, so that they can consolidate it and develop. So the homework that we assign should be really focused in relation to our students' needs. Then we have feedback. We need to consider how we're going to give feedback and how much feedback we're going to give. Nowadays, due to technology, we have like different ways of providing students with feedback. For example, I remember that back in 2007, when I started preparing students for exams, as we didn't have access to Google Docs and this kind of stuff, most of the feedback was the students would write, and then they give it to me, the paper. I would give them feedback. So this back and forth would take a long time. Nowadays, I have my students write their essays or whatever piece of writing on a Google Doc, and then they can just share it with me. I can read it, can give them feedback. They can rewrite it. So all this, the feedback and the back and forth happens very quickly and in a more interactive way. And finally, you have to consider how we're going to monitor our students' progress, because I think it's important for them to know where they started, where they need to get in order to take the exam, and how much they have improved along the way. But we need to find a ways to show them that how this improvement has taken place. So if you have just started teaching, or if you're planning on starting to prepare students for exams, this, especially Cambridge exams, because this is specifically focused on Cambridge exams, there is a tool called Weekly. You probably can see the website right below the picture, weekly.cambridgeenglish.org. So this tool, before I tell you, let me ask you a question here. How many of you are familiar with this tool? If you are, please type yes in the chat box. Yes. Okay, Fabiola says yes. Manu says no, no, no. All right, so not everybody is familiar. Great. So if you go to Weekly, not now, because wait until the end of the webinar, but if you go to weekly.cambridgeenglish.org, this tool can help you plan the course, your course. So, and it basically you have to follow 3 steps. So choose the exam. Not all exams are available. So far you can find A2, B1, and B2. So C1 and C2 are not available yet. So you choose the exam you're going to teach. Then when you go to point number 2, there is a teaching weeks available. So how many weeks you have until the exam. Here I have chosen 20 weeks, which is pretty much the semester, right? The number of weeks that students are going to have classes throughout one semester. Then the number of hours per week. So I chose 2 hours. And having chosen the exam, the number of weeks available, and how much time you're going to teach, Weekly, the tool is going to help you to choose the areas that you're going to prioritize. So in this case, you would prioritize writing, reading, use of English, and speaking would be the last one. So once you have chosen the areas that you're going to prioritize and you click on Build My Plan, the tool is going to provide you with a plan with regards to the number of weeks you've chosen. Here you can see, for example, the plan in relation to week 1, 2, and 3. But as I told you before, as I've chosen 20 weeks, I got the plan for all the weeks that I've chosen. Let me show you how it works. If you look at week number 3, you have here the plan for a 1 hour and 45 minutes lesson. And if you click on reading, you're going to get a lesson plan, which is focused on reading use of English. This is a 50-minute plan because there are other, let me just refer back to yes, there are other areas here that I'm going to be working on, speaking, listening. And there's also a webinar that they suggest to help the teacher to gain a better understanding of the exam. So if you click on reading, you're going to get this lesson plan. And here you can see that this is a lesson plan. You can also use it to encourage student understanding of a text before they begin the task. It will help you familiarize students with the format of part 1 and to develop strategies for choosing the correct option and eliminating distractors. This resource should take 50 minutes, but can be adjusted to fill a shorter or longer lesson. Of course, that you may feel the need to adapt it, but I think it's a great start. I mean, you have a very good overview with regards to what you're going to work on, the different skills, the different areas, some suggestions in terms of lessons, the lesson plan, which can be easily adapted. But at least you have, I mean, if you're not that experienced, you have something to hold on to. So it gives you some support. All right, moving on to exam strategies. All right, let me show you what I mean by exam strategies, just to make sure that we are on the same page. This is a listening test, which was taken from a B1 level exam. And if you look at question number 1, you're going to see that it asks, why did the girl buy on her shopping trip? And if you take a look at the script, you're going to see that the correct answer is in orange, right? It's when she says, I'd prefer to have a lamp on my desk, so that's what I got today. However, if you look at these two words that have been circled in blue, you have bookshelves and cushions. You can see that both words are also the pictures. So this is a very common exam strategy when we teach students to, as they listen, to pay attention to what we call distractors. So students, and then once the students understand that they're going to hear or to be exposed to distractors, they are better prepared to take listening exams, because they know that they're going to hear words, the same word, some of the words that they're expecting, but just hearing the word doesn't mean that that's the correct answer. So then they have to focus on the whole idea and avoid just choosing an answer because they heard a word that's part of the task. Very common exam strategy to raise students' awareness to distractors. Another one, when they are dealing with reading texts, is if you look at question number 11 here, we have Peter enjoys mountain biking because, and then we teach students all the exam strategies of trying to find the answer in the text. Once you find it, and then you refer back to the options, choose the option that best paraphrases the answer. But then again, you have here some students that may fall into the trap of choosing an option just because they see the same word both in the option and in the text. Here, for instance, if you look at letter D, you can see that you have the word concentrate. It helps him to concentrate better. And if you refer back to the text in blue, you also have concentrating. Some students, because they find the same word in the option in the text, they may choose this option believing that's the correct one. And this is called word spotting. So they spot the same word and they choose it without reading it very carefully. So this is what I mean by exam strategies. And I think they are extremely helpful and incredibly useful. However, I have seen many teachers overemphasizing exam strategies as if they were the only thing students need in order to pass the exam. Again, let me stress that they are really helpful, but sometimes there's only so much exam strategies can do to help our students. In my opinion, they can help students perform better, and most importantly, they can help students with the pressure the exam is going to put on them, and also anxiety. Because once students are familiar with what they have to do, once they know exactly what they need to do and how to do it, it tends to help to reduce their anxiety. So they step into the room to take the exam more confidently because they know exactly what they need to do. However, if you spend most of the exam preparation just working on exam strategies, I don't think it can be the best way of tackling it. So sometimes we have to be very attentive to analyze if the problem is lack of exam strategies or language and skills themselves. In my experience, when students start taking a prep course, some of them, they just want to focus on exam strategies because they assume that they have the language level required. Of course, that this is something we can test, we can assess right beforehand to make sure that they do have the level or not. But if we notice that even though they are very well familiar with exam strategies and they're still struggling to do well in the exam, I think that we have to consider working on language and skills. To be honest, in all my exam prep courses, I work on both language and skills and exam strategies. Even in my crash course, which is shorter, I find a way to squeeze in some language development. Now, I'm going to show you two lesson objectives, and I'd like you to use the chat box to tell me what the main differences between them are. So this is lesson objective number 1. And imagine here that you are sharing your lesson objective with your students. So in this lesson, you complete the B2 first reading part 5. And this is number 2. In this lesson, you become better able to identify writer's attitude, which will help you with reading part 5. What are some of the differences you can pinpoint by looking at these two lesson objectives? English for Less says your goal is more precise. The goal. Ana Maria says 1, just language. 2, meaning. Okay. Second is clearer. Okay, skill is described. It's not only about the task, but the skills behind it, Median says. Great. It's absolutely correct. I think that when you start an exam prep course and then every class, or I would say most of the classes, students are required to take a mock exam or a task. Even though you might argue that you are providing them with practice, and practice is definitely much needed, I would say that we can do better than that. We can go beyond practice and help students get something out of it. If you look at the second one, for instance, it's not just a question of having students practice the task, but also to help them become better able to identify something which can also be useful, which actually is useful in real life, right? To read something and understand the writer's attitude. So it's more specific. And also, I think that it helps the student to see a broader sense of achievement, in the sense that they're not just practicing again, but they're taking something out of their practice, out of their test. Okay, how can you find out the skills and the sub-skills that you need to focus on? Just like this one, for instance, was the very specific goal, right? Is to help students become better able to identify the writer's attitude when they read a text, which again, in turn, can help them with reading part 5. You can find more information on that. If you are teaching Cambridge exams, for example, you can go to the cambridgeenglish.org. And when you read about each task, you have what students need to practice. So for instance, when it comes to reading part 5, you have reading for detail, opinion, tone, purpose, main idea, implication, and attitude. So once you are familiar with the sub-skills that your students need to develop, it's easier to plan lessons that are going to be more focused and more meaningful to them. As I told you before, I personally try to take every opportunity I have to squeeze in some language development work. I took this from one of my slides, so it was a real lesson. My students were working on a listening exercise, as you can see here. The ones you're probably familiar with it, the ones you have to listen to an extract and answer 2 questions. The issue here is the course book they're using, as good as it is, it doesn't provide much language work or language development after reading and listening exercises. So I always try to design a very simple task to get them to notice the language that was used in the listening or the reading exercise. I think that we should try to take advantage of the fact that the language they're going to encounter in texts, and when I say texts here, I mean either listening or reading, is language that is targeted at the level that they're studying for, right? Obviously. So I think that language should be explored. So just to give you an example here, having done this listening exercise, I got my students to focus on some of the words and expressions that were used. Take a look at my slide here, number 1. Here I tried to get their attention to the use of the word stifle. The speaker said that she had no wish to stifle any artistic genius, his son might have. Then I gave them 2 sentences so that they could compare the more literal and more figurative meaning of stifle. Also the expression that appears in the listening exercise, the exercise hit the roof, and the use of the phrasal verb wind up. So I always get them to explore the reading and the listening exercise further, and focus on language, because I think it's a great material and it shouldn't go unnoticed. All right. Homework. As I mentioned before, whenever we are preparing students for exams, we need to plan very carefully the homework we're going to assign, with a view to helping students to consolidate or develop the work that we started in the classroom, right? And nowadays there are so many options that we can choose from. But a typical mistake is when we have students do mock exams, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't. Actually, I think it's very important to get students to do mock exams at home, especially under exam conditions, so that they can feel what it's like to work under pressure and against the clock. So in a way, we can try to emulate the experience that they're going to have on the day of the exam. But once again, what concerns me here is that if students keep taking mock exams, one after the other, and they don't take anything out of it. So they take the mock exam, they send it to you, you correct, you give them the right answers, and that's it. I think that there can be a more productive way of using mock exams. Let me give an example of some of the things I do. So if I have students do a listening exercise as a mock at home, and then they send their answers to me, I give them feedback, I share with them the script, and I have them refer back to the script and find the right answer. In this case, for example, it's a reading exercise, right? Yes. So it works both ways, reading and listening too. But let me take this reading as an example. So they do a reading exercise, they send it to me, I give them feedback, but I also show them, or actually I encourage them to refer back to the text, find the right answer, and try to reflect on why they got it wrong. So in a way, you get them to think about their mistakes, kind of an error analysis activity. So you get them to think about the mistake so that they can understand what they did and what they should have done. And I think that this process of referring back and thinking about the mistake can really help them to avoid making the same mistake next time. Of course, it depends on the kind of mistake, but this whole thing of referring back and reflecting on the mistakes make them more aware of the potential traps that they may face in the future. Nowadays, there are also lots of apps that students can use to keep on practicing at home, whether they're preparing for exams such as IELTS or TOEFL. Cambridge also has new apps. There's this new one called Exam Lift. They have it for preliminary and A2 key. It's a very nice one. They also have Write and Improve, where students can practice writing. There is this Quiz Your English. So there is a myriad of possibilities that students can use to keep on practicing. Things that are more formal, such as mock exams, and things that are, we could say that they're more informal, but also very effective. Nicola Prentice, in her book, How to Teach First Certificate, she draws our attention to different types of students. And there is a type of student she describes as SLL, which stands for Successful Language Learner. And one of the points she makes about successful language learners, and I have chosen this part specifically because it's intimately related to homework, is successful language learners are students who can concentrate on the feedback and corrections they get from their teacher. I cannot stress it enough. When students get feedback, they're preparing for the exam and they get feedback from the teacher, we should encourage, we should, in a way, I would say, educate them to make the best use possible of the feedback they get. So if it's an essay, for example, to focus on the points that we have drawn their attention to try to rewrite it so that they can give it back to us and keep on, improving. Or also when it comes to listening or reading, so the points that they can refer back once they have the key and try to understand why they made mistakes. Or if they have sent you, for example, WhatsApp message, sometimes I have my students send me audio files. So they record themselves, they send them to me, and then I give them feedback. But I also encourage them to try it again, to take the opportunity, not just to see it as a way of testing them, but as an opportunity for development. Okay, now we're heading towards our last topic. Great. Yes, so it's about progress. As I mentioned before, we have to find a way to show our students that where they started and how much progress they've been making throughout the course, right? So 3 questions to keep in mind here when it comes to help students see their progress is our starting point. What do my learners already know? Because once you have identified what they know, then it's easier for you to decide what they need to focus more on, what they need to work on. So we need a starting point. Number 2, what can I do to help them learn? So what do they need to practice more? How can I assist them to go from point A to point B? And number 3, what evidence do I have that they are improving? I think this question is crucial because they must see, and I think we should make it as visual as possible so they can see that they are improving, and it's not just us saying, they can see it throughout their journey. So something that I enjoy doing, and this is my last tip, is sorry, I have a file for each of my students, and I think that most of you who teach exam classes also do the same thing. So I have a file for each one of them, and as they start taking practice tests and mock exams, I start keeping track of their results. So as you can see here, for instance, I have this table. This is for the listening. So when they take test 1 and they send it to me, I take notes of their results. So, and then the same thing for test 2 and test 3. So as the course progresses, they can see, for example, how much they've been improving or how much they still need to work on. So each one has, they have their own file, and they get feedback so that they can see how much they've improved, so their strengths, and also the areas that we still need to work on. Okay, great. I think that I have 1 minute left. So today we have discussed how to become a successful exams teacher, the importance of understanding the exam you're going to teach, a few things that you need to take into account when you are designing your course, what you need to consider when developing exam strategies in language so that you can strike a balance between the two. Oops, there is a problem here. Monitoring progress. Yes, and number 5, for some reason it's not appearing. It was homework. So how to help students with self-studying. Okay, I'd like to wrap it up with a quote. I think that when we get into exam teaching, it can be a little bit overwhelming, right? Because it's there's so many things to learn and so many things to understand. But I think this quote really sums up it pretty brilliantly. Who dares to teach must never cease to learn. So if you are new to exams preparation, don't worry. I've been working with that for a long time, and I learn something new every day. And I think it happens to all of us, right? Thank you very much. So if you want to keep this discussion